Hey guys, it's Sign here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we're going to be doing our monthly check-in for the month of April. And it's been pretty good. I haven't really read too much, actually. I've mostly been watching stuff, right? So we'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about what I read and kind of just in general, stuff about the channel, like always, right? So let's get started here. In terms of what I've been watching, I started the month off watching Godzilla vs. Kong, New Empire, whatever, Godzilla X Kong, whatever the fucking title is. And I thought it was fun. I have to say, I didn't enjoy myself as much as I thought I would after the movie. And I'm not really sure why, because I usually do enjoy the American Godzilla movies, right? All the MonsterVerse movies, right? And I can come up with like 2 or 3 reasons why. And I think, and they are not related to the fact that Godzilla Minus One is infinitely better than this movie. Like, I don't really care about that. I don't really judge movies that are separate based on another thing, right? And, like if it was like Star Wars, I would judge it based on how the previous Star Wars movies are. Right, but Godzilla from Japan and Godzilla from the US are not really the same thing, right? It'd be like judging Dracula movies that are all made by different people and saying that they're bad against each other. It's like, well, you could say that, but maybe you shouldn't, because they're not really trying to accomplish the same thing, right? Or continuing a story, right? So it's not fair to do that, right? In this case, I think that this movie is probably the 2nd or 3rd best in the MonsterVerse. It's not my favorite movie, and some of the reasons why I think that are, I don't care about the human characters. I think the little girl was fine, but it was annoying when we switched to the human characters, because it like completely halted the momentum that the Titan characters were like developing, right? So that was one reason why I found this movie to be a bit lacking. The other one is that Kong looks too human now, if that makes sense. Like, Kong is no longer a fucking creepy giant ape. He is like a weird, like, giant friend of yours that is very good at expressing himself the same way humans do. And it's kind of creepy, right? And the thing is that it's not supposed to be like that. And so I didn't like that, he had so many human-like expressions, right? And the funny thing is, and I think it's kind of odd, is that I don't really mind that the, monkeys in Planet of the Apes have human-like expressions, but it does bother me when Kong does it. And I think that's because the baseline for those two types of ape characters with like human levels of intelligence are quite different, right? The apes in Planet of the Apes have had a conscious effort to like become like that over time, so that we could get to like the point where we had like the original Planet of the Apes movies, right? Where they were just like people with like slightly weird mouths, right? Whereas Kong is clearly like an intelligent monster, and every time that he shows up in a new movie, he looks more and more human, and it's just odd because that's not the point of him, right? And so I didn't like that either. Also, there's like a lack of scale. Like, Pacific Rim, the best part about that movie is not necessarily the fun action or the amazing soundtrack or the fucking cheesy ass acting. It's like the fact that when fucking Gypsy Danger or whatever, Gypsy Danger moves, you fucking feel it, right? Like, there is such a like weight to those giant fucking metal monsters. And I don't feel like anything weighed anything in this movie. And it was really annoying. Also, I don't believe that Scar King would beat Kong in a fight. even though he clearly does it like 2 or 3 times in the movie, because Scar King or whatever his name is a skinny ass motherfucker, and there's nothing special about him besides the fact that he has that stupid, piece of ice that controls the ice dog thing. Because especially because as soon as Kong arrives to the fucking monkey prison or whatever, and they do the fucking Tarzan ape dance, which was awesome. I loved that scene. I thought that was great. He knocks out a dude with a single punch before he starts fighting Scar King, and Scar King somehow manages to beat Kong, even though he's like a fucking twig compared to Kong. It was really annoying because it didn't feel like possible. Like, I understand if he outsmarts Kong, right? Like, that makes sense. If he's smarter than Kong because he's older or whatever. But the first, fight that they have, the first kind of exchange is purely physical, and Kong loses it. And I don't find that to be enjoyable. Not because I want Kong to win because he's, the main character. And it's not about that. It's that I physically could not believe that a gorilla was going to get beat by a fucking twig-ass orangutan, right? It didn't work. IRL, I'm sure a gorilla and an orangutan could have a pretty epic fight, right? But King Kong, the biggest fucking swollest gorilla man ever, is not gonna get beat up by a fucking skinny ass motherfucking orangutan, dude. That is how Scar King looks, right? And also he does a Dio pose, and it was weird. I didn't like that. I thought it was funny, but I didn't think it was great. So yeah, I don't know. I was a bit disappointed by it. It was still $6 well spent. I enjoyed going to the movie. I enjoyed having 2 hours to turn off my brain and watch this crazy movie. But it didn't feel like what I wanted it to be, which kind of sucks. It's a bit disheartening and sad about it. But it's whatever. I might go watch it again just to double check, right? Maybe I just wasn't in the mood that day. I don't know, but it was fine. I've been watching Shogun as well, Shogun Season 1, or, Shogun the Limited Series. And I do have to say, the second half of the series has not been as good as the first 5 episodes. And I'm not really sure why that is. I think it's because the pacing kind of felt weird, right? The pacing is completely understandable because of how the story is told and what is happening in the story. But it feels slightly off. It feels like we had this really amazing, epically climbing set of moments and situations that were, very revealing and interesting, and tension was building, and then for whatever reason that tension kind of stopped, and we kept it at this level that didn't feel that somehow felt lesser than before for 2 or 3 episodes, right? And then Nakagako, or whatever his name is, dies, and then we have this new episode where they're grieving, and at that point I think that we're back, right? But it doesn't feel as good as the first half of the season. And I think that that's a bit sad, because I was expecting it to be amazing through and through. And it might be if the ending is amazing, I will be completely okay with, a hump in the middle, right? Because that's kind of expected for stories, right? Middle episode syndrome or mid-season, slump is understandable and kind of par for the course, right? In anything. But I had this expectation that wasn't going to happen. And the fact that it did is kind of a little bit disappointing, right? But overall, I still enjoy those lesser episodes. I just don't think that I like them as much as the first 5. I think the first 5 are phenomenal. The first 5 are fucking perfect, right? Or close enough to perfect for me to say that they are, right? But then the following 3 episodes after that were just not as good. Even though I understand why, it's not the same, right? It doesn't have that same oomph to it that I was expecting from the rest of the series. So yeah, That's kind of my thoughts on that. I will have to wait until the end of the season to make a second video talking about my feelings, and I will try to explain them better then, right? Then I watched The Three Body Problem, and I actually really enjoyed this show, even though I have major fucking issues with it. I'm not going to do a review for the show, so I'm going to try to talk about it a bit in depth here. Basically, the show has an amazing premise, and I quite like all of the characters, except for Saul. I don't really like Saul. I like all of the characters to different levels. Davos is my favorite. That's not his name, but like Davos, that was what he was in Game of Thrones. He's my favorite character. Then I like Jin, and then I like the Hispanic lady. I forgot her name in the show, Augie. And then I liked Jack. Will is a boring ass motherfucker. Although his sacrifice is cool. And I don't like Saul. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I like Augie better than him. And so I kind of side with her on their, love conflict or whatever. I don't know. But the Sir Davos is probably the best character in that show. And the premise is fucking phenomenal, right? But I really hated the ending. Like, I don't hate it in the sense that it's bad. I hate it in the sense that the ending didn't feel like the end of a season. It felt like a normal episode ending. And it was kind of boring and lame. And that is not a great way to finish a season. Because why would I come back if I don't care about what happens? Because the ending was so like clear cut. We're probably all gonna fucking die. Who cares? Right? Like, it didn't feel satisfying. It didn't make me want to go read the books. And it didn't make me want to, like, rush for the next season. Like, it was just a very mild, middle-of-the-road ending for this, like, really interesting show. And that's kind of disappointing. Also, sometimes it feels like there's scenes that are missing. Like, there's more explanation or more, like, exposition that needs to be done for us to understand why the characters are doing things, because so many times, so many of the situations that they find themselves in feel so idiotic and satisfying. It's fun because these characters completely take it seriously. Like, okay, we have to deal with it. We have to do what we have to do in order to make it work. And that's completely fair. But I don't understand how a civilization that can create, arc ships and can create computers inside atoms and can create faster than light communication and do all of these things can't make a fucking biodome to live in their shitty ass planet. Especially because they've somehow managed to become more advanced than human civilization, even though their civilization ends constantly. Like, they have like cataclysmic events all the time on their fucking stupid ass planet. And they've managed to make all of these leaps in technology. And they're controlling humanity from afar. But they can't figure out a fucking way to make a dome so that the fucking three-body problem doesn't become an issue. Like, that sounds ridiculous. Like, there's no way that they are not able to fix that, right? If they can make ships that can travel through space for 500 years or 400 years, however, how can they not make a fucking dome over their planet? Like, that sounds crazy, right? Like, I don't understand how they're not able to do this. Because, okay, you might be arguing, like, well, maybe the cataclysm stops them from building anything that takes longer than a few days to build. Sure. So, make a fucking teepee that doesn't get fucked by your cataclysm, and then from the teepee, make 2 more teepees, and then make 3 teepees, and then you continuously do this over time, right? Like, I don't understand. It seems impossible that they would not be able to fix it if they can do all of this other stuff, right? And then from the human perspective, it's like, well, okay, first of all, Yi Wing-jae, or whatever her name is, the Chinese lady, that bitch was crazy. Like, I liked her. I thought she was an interesting character. But, like, holy fuck, why would you ruin civilization just because your country sucks? Like, that is insane. That was crazy to me. it was insanely petty, and I thought that was phenomenal. Like, that was great. But also, like, you just doomed humanity for no fucking reason. Just because your life was shitty. Like, that is not, like, I don't know, that doesn't work for me, right? But understandable. But, like, the human characters always have, like, weird-ass situations that they find themselves in, and they pick, like, the stupidest way to solve it. And sometimes it makes sense, and then other times I'm like, dude, all of you are supposed to be highly educated, thoughtful, scientific people, and you can't ask the simplest fucking questions. Now, look, I am an engineer. I hang out with people that still work in academia. I understand that sometimes when you're deep in your science, you kind of forget to think about anything else, and you actually maybe don't know how to think about anything else. I understand that, right? But all of these characters are clearly able to think beyond what they're good at. And it's sometimes they ask like stupid ass questions, or they think that they're stuck in a situation when there's like a clear answer out of the way, right? And it's just like very contrived sometimes. And although the show is still good, like the tension builds over the show, and it's really enjoyable, and there's like very cool, crazy mysteries throughout the whole show. Like once or twice an episode, I'm just like screaming at the fucking TV. It's just so crazy, right? Like they do like the stupidest things. But it's also enjoyable, right? Like I like that they do stupid things, even though it frustrates me because like it works for the show, right? So I don't know. I feel really frustrated with this, with the ending of the show specifically, and then that just kind of compounds onto all of the other things that I don't understand about the show, or that make me kind of like annoyed about the show. I do want to read the book, but it's not because I love the ending of the show so much, or the show so much, that I want to read more. It's more like I want to know if they're that stupid in the books as well, because Shishing Liu, or whatever the name or the right pronunciation for this guy is, like the guy that wrote the story, it's well renowned, right? Like they are a great writer, and I'm not sure that that's true based on like the adaptation, right? Like, so I don't know, but who knows? We'll see. Then I started watching Fieren, right? I watched 5 episodes of it, and I really love it. Actually, I think it's great. I understand why so many people like it. I'm not so inclined to read it. I don't care too much still. But I find the pace and the style and the characters in Fieren to be quite enjoyable, because it's very relaxing. There is a certain level of like calmness that this show exudes, right? Like there's crazy stuff that happens in the show, right? But broadly, there's a certain level of like bittersweet, like introspective thoughtfulness that the show kind of invokes in me while I watch it. And it's very calming. It's quite satisfying, right? I'm not necessarily living a very like exciting life right now, but I feel like it reminds me of like when I go visit my grandma in Mexico, right? She lives in a small town, kind of pretty far away from, you know, what you would consider normal civilization here in the US, right? Where I live in a big city, right? And when I go to her place, I'm like, I'm not really doing anything too different from what I would do at home, but the vibe is completely different because I don't have car noises all around me. I don't have to move quickly. I don't have to drive everywhere. Like there's a certain slowness that comes with going to visit my grandma where she lives that is very satisfying and calming to me, right? It helps me relax. And Fieren manages to have that same kind of vibe to it that I find really satisfying, right? And so I've really enjoyed the first 5 episodes that I watched. I kind of feel like binging the series, but I feel like binging the series kind of will eliminate the positive feelings that I have with the series, right? Like going through and watching all the episodes in quick succession is going to kind of nullify some of that relaxation, right? And so I think I'm going to take my time with it over the month. I will probably finish it, you know, soon, but I don't think I'll watch more than two episodes every couple days, right? Like I don't necessarily want to rush through the series. It's very relaxing, and I want to keep it that way, right? So we'll see how it goes. But that was great. I really enjoyed it. I love the music as well. And I really like the English dub. I think Fieren's voice is beautiful. Fern's is fine. I don't care about all the other characters. I like the dwarf though. I think his voice is very nice. But Fieren's voice is very calming and relaxing. And I like it. So yeah, then I watched the first episode of Kaiju number 8, and it was phenomenal. I'm very happy how they adapted this. I do have some issues with the character models, to be honest with you. Mina's character model feels flat-faced. Like, it feels like she doesn't have a nose or any, like, protruding features in her face, and it looks kind of off. But Kafka and Reno are, you know, perfect. I really like how they look. I mean, Kafka still looks a little bit dopey, more so than he does in the manga, but Reno is perfect. And I think that the dopiness kind of helps with some of the sillier moments that Kafka has. So I really like how everyone and everything looks. The kaiju looked phenomenal. And they also had that kind of like Pacific Rim glowiness to them that I liked a lot. But Mina specifically just kind of doesn't look that great. And I hope that Kikoru looks better. But she might not. And that's fine. It's okay if she doesn't. But I'm curious to see how it goes. My roommate liked it, so he said he might read the manga here soon because I share my Shonen Jump app with him. And we'll see if he likes it. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good start, a good adaptation. I still need to go back and watch the Soul Leveling one, now that I think about adaptations of manga and light novels that I like. So I will probably go do that in the coming days. But yeah, for now, Kaiju number 8, perfect. It really makes me want to go back to reading the series because, you know, if you've been a fan of the channel, you probably noticed that I stopped reviewing the chapters. And that's more or less because, you know, I felt like I was rushing to read them. I wasn't enjoying reading them as much as I would if I was just reading them for myself. And then there was like no feedback on those videos. So I decided to stop doing them many months ago. I didn't announce it or anything because I didn't think anyone cared. And I think that that's still true now. But I'm still mentioning this to document it for the sake of myself when I rewatch these videos, right? I basically stopped reading whenever, you know, it was like chapter 80 or something, because I wanted to let it build up. And I am thinking about restarting the series and starting to, you know, review it arc by arc. And I might do that here soon, right? Because I do have the first 9 volumes physically and I have access to the app. So it's all kind of there for me, right? But at the same time, I'm like, well, do I want to reread a series or do I want to start something new, right? Like, there's kind of a quandary that I find myself in here where, you know, should I take the time to reestablish myself in a series I already know and love, or should I take the time, that same time and go into a new series instead? So we'll see what happens, but I have thought about it, right? I am kind of curious about that because I really like Kaiju number 8 and I had kind of left it to the wayside for a while, so kind of want to come back to it, right? And then finally I watched Monkey Man, the Dave Patel, you know, Indian John Wick. And it was pretty great. I really liked it. I thought it was fun. I watched it earlier today. I decided not to do a review for it because basically there was a little bit of a timing issue. Me and my roommates went, as well as one of my roommates' girlfriends, and she went with us, and we all watched it together. But we got there a little bit late. I think the movie had just started, so we missed like a fight scene at the beginning of the movie. And then we kind of watched the whole rest of the thing. But then I had to go to the restroom. I could not hold it in anymore. I had to rush out of the theater. And I basically did that right at the very climactic, cathartic moment of the movie, right? And so I can't really judge the whole movie if I didn't really experience the most important moment, right? Like, I saw the big fight against Raja Singh or whatever, but I didn't see the bit after that that's supposed to be like the catharsis for like the religious aspect of the character, right? And so I might want to go watch the movie again because I liked it enough to do so. And if I do it on Tuesdays, it'll only be $6. So it'd be fine. It wouldn't be too difficult for me to kind of decide to do. But everything that I did watch was great. I really enjoyed my time with it. I think besides some slight issues with like shaky cam and kind of the positioning of the camera throughout some of the action scenes, I think everything else was phenomenal, right? There was these interesting, like, fighting scenes that happened in a underground fighting ring, and that kind of reminded me a little bit of Spider-Man, you know, like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. And then there was some stuff that was very John Wick-esque, of course. And then, but there was also this kind of like Jason Bourne vibe to it, right? You know, I can't remember which Bourne movie it was, but there's one where they go to Manila. I think that one is when it's Jeremy Renner, right? The Bourne, what's it called? I can't remember. That Bourne movie. And then there's like a proper Jason Bourne movie where they're in Asia, right? I think. And it had this kind of very similar like vibe to it, where there's like this like element of infiltration and this element of like you're a rogue character in like a city full of danger and you have to figure out what the fuck you're doing. Like, it had very similar moments to that. It was also like a man in a business suit beating the shit out of people, so it was a very John Wick movie. There's also a lot of elements of comedy that mostly worked for me. So I really liked this movie. I thought it was great. There were some issues, like I said, but the issues were pretty minimal. The movie was also quite interesting. There's a religious element to the character, because that's why he is the monkey man, right? It's kind of a... it almost has this like hero's journey vibe to it, where the main character is following the journey of Hanuman, right? Like the monkey god, right? Or whatever. The inspiration for Sun Wukong, who was the inspiration for Goku, who was the inspiration for Luffy, you know, that sort of character. And so he has this kind of like religious aspect to him that is quite interesting. The Indian aesthetic of the movie was, of course, quite good. Everyone in the movie, except for one character, was Indian. And it was very... Well, I don't know if it's true to life, but it felt very, very true. It felt very similar to, you know, what my friends have told me India is like. There's also... It wasn't... It showed you clearly how shitty some of these parts of India are, right? Like, it didn't shy away from showing you the ugliness of reality, right? And so, to me, it reminded me a lot of, like, Mexican movies that do that a lot. So, that was interesting. But also, there was a lot of elements to the movie that were there to make it seem like a sexier movie, right? Like, not necessarily sexy as in, like, it gets you hot on the collar, in the sense more that, like, the movie is hot, and it's not just about, like, the main character being attractive and being this, like, awesome suited guy that beats up bad guys. There's also, like, that, like, James Bond, like, he's cool, he's suave, he's collected. There's a hot chick that is also cool, calm, collected. And there's this like byplay between these characters, right? And there's a lot of this type of stuff that kind of wanted you to think that the movie was sexy, was cool, was interesting. That worked for me. I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was great. So yeah, I recommend it. I think if you guys like, you know, street food or whatever, I don't know what they call it, like John Wick movies, watch this. It's good. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, that's it for what I've watched. In terms of what I've been reading, well, I started reading Wandering in number 5, book 5, which is the first part of volume 4. I'm like 7 or 8 chapters in, so there's 6 chapters of the king perspective from Chandra. His name is Floss. And actually, I think this is good because it doesn't actually deal with the king. It deals with Trey and Teresa, which are the 2 Earth characters from the Wandering Inn. And so it's good that they finally made an appearance, and then that the perspective is on them, because when the perspective was on how they were seeing Floss, interact, I didn't give a shit. Now that the characters are kind of more important and you kind of get to see inside Trey's mind, I like it quite a bit more. I think it's much better. There's also some really good moments in these episodes, or in these chapters. But broadly speaking, I still think I don't care too much about this character, except for very key, like, small moments where it's like, oh, that shit was awesome. Like, that was phenomenal. Like, even if it wasn't really a fight scene, it was maybe just some other thing or some interesting comment that a character did that was really exciting to me for whatever reason. Like, that stuff was good. Then we finally switched perspectives. I think we get a Tauren chapter in there, which was also quite interesting, because Torin was supposed to no longer exist for whatever reason, whatever happened in the previous book, right, that I don't want to necessarily spoil, but he managed to survive. And then he takes on a different identity. So this becomes kind of like a masked adventurer type thing that is quite exciting and quite interesting and quite different from what I was expecting from him, right? I thought he would die and that would be it, right? But it doesn't seem like that's the case, and I'm very excited to see where it goes. Other than that, I don't think I read too much more beyond that. I can't remember if there was a Rags chapter or an Aaron chapter in between. I don't know, but good stuff. I liked it. I thought it was enjoyable. In terms of other novels, I haven't really read any. I said I was going to read Legends of Lattes, not Wandering In, but I couldn't help myself. I wanted to watch Wandering In, especially after I finished editing my 2 reviews for volume 3, books 3 and 4. I was like, fuck, I just really want to get into more Wandering In, so I started reading it. And I know I shouldn't because I have other stuff to read, but it's just so satisfying. Like, it's just so enjoyable to read that story, even when I'm reading perspectives I don't like, right? Like, there's something just great about the way that Pirate Apple writes. Like, it really enthralls me, and it makes me quite happy to read. So, I don't know. We'll see. I need to stop, though. I should not keep reading. I really want to do a book chatter episode, which is a new kind of video series I want to launch, just to talk about the Wandering In without kind of forcing myself to think about it in terms of volumes. Like, I just want to talk about the series. It has to be like a spoiler episode, right? Which is kind of not great because it limits a lot of interest in the series. But also, at the same time, very few people talk about the Wandering In a spoilery fashion. And I think that it's good that I kind of cover that because, like, I think it's Sam Harrison. I think that's his name. He does like chapter reviews, right? Like he started the series and he's going chapter by chapter. And I actually quite like his videos. But they sometimes I'm like, oh, this is way too specific. I don't necessarily need to go chapter by chapter. And then I try to look up for other people that are reading it, and it's usually spoiler-free reviews. And it's like, dude, I don't necessarily, if I'm watching video number 7, book 7, I don't necessarily need a spoiler-free review. I just need to know what you liked about it. I want to hear other people's opinions, right? But I don't want to read like Reddit reviews because that's kind of annoying. Like, Reddit is a cesspool. It's not as bad as Twitter at this point, I feel like, but I don't necessarily enjoy spending my time on Reddit, right? And so I want to see more YouTubers talk about the series in a spoilery kind of like broad sense, and it doesn't seem like it's happening. So I'm gonna keep going with what I'm doing, and if that means I have to read everything really quickly, well, I'm willing to sacrifice myself because I really like reading it, right? So yeah, but at the same time, I'm like, fuck, it takes 5 hours to deal with this video, right? Like I record it for 2 hours, a little bit more, and then it takes me like 3 or 4 hours to edit it, which is actually quite fast, but that's because I don't edit too much. I'm sure other people take way longer to edit videos that are like that long. But it is immensely satisfying to read and then write and then, record and edit and do all of it and get the video out. So I don't know. I'll probably end up keep doing it the way I'm doing it, even if it like slowly just gets longer and longer, right? So we'll see. But yeah, I don't know. Very good stuff. The Wandering In is wonderful. Keep reading it if you are reading it, and if you aren't, start reading it. It's great. So yeah, I haven't read anything else in terms of novels. I've just focused on The Wandering In. However, I have bought some cool ones this month that I might want to jump into. I know I said I was going to read Legends of Lattes, and I do want to, but I don't know. I always feel like there's more important things to read, or more things that are like pulling me more than Legends of Lattes. So we'll see when I get around to reading it. But yeah, otherwise I basically just have comic books. That's the only other stuff I read this month. So I do have 2 manga that I'll mention here briefly at the end. But in terms of comics, I've been reading a bunch of single issues, right? So I basically read all of last month's comics, in the first 2 days. So here's this free Planet of the Apes book. It was fine. I think the artwork is cool, but I don't really care about the story. Like, I don't I understand all I need to understand about how the Planet of the Apes happened, right? Like the first movie, like the first modern movie, tells you exactly what happened, and you don't need to know anymore. I don't care about the upheaval between, you know, the movies. It doesn't really matter to me because it's all implied and I can understand it without, you know, needing to read it. Also read this. Only the first story. This one, the necromancy one, has any actual plot in it. It was good, but I'm not gonna bother chasing it down. Here's the Marvel must-haves that I did a video on already. These are pretty cool. I actually like them a lot. I think they're good, but as long as they're free, I'm gonna keep getting them. I don't think I'll actually end up buying any Marvel comics. I broadly like don't care about that. You know, all of the stuff that is there. Not in the sense that I don't like the characters. I do like the characters actually quite a bit, but it's more like I don't care about how they write the stories. Something about them feels a lot less satisfying to me than like a DC story or, you know, a proper indie story that I know has a beginning, middle, and end, and it's going to eventually end at some point, whether it's in, you know, 3 issues or, you know, 47. But I know it's going to end, right? So it's I don't know, it feels better for me to read. Whereas the Marvel ones just continuously flow in a way that I don't think is that great, right? So I'm not going to really bother reading them too much. But I will continue to get the must-haves because they're pretty fun. And since they're free, it's quite a bit bang for your buck, right? 3 issues for nothing is quite good. But again, I am very curious about who actually eats the cost of that. I doubt it's Marvel, right? It's not going to be Disney. So I guess it's the comic book shops, but I don't know. Here's Blue Beetle number 8, and I also read number 7 again. So that's good. Quite like it. And then here's No One number 8. This was fine. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. Rebel Moon number 3. Also okay. Didn't hate it, didn't love it. It's just fine. Only one more issue left, so I'm not going to bother dropping it. Here's Still Lucky number 12. This was a fine ending, but... and maybe this isn't the right thing to say, but I feel like this story cared more about its like real life message than it cared about, you know, the story. Like a lot about the framing of the story is like a veteran coming back home dealing with like survivor's guilt. And I think that's a very valuable kind of like thing to talk about, right? And there's a lot of like resources and things that go into this from the outside, right? Like at the end of each issue, they tell you if you've had any of the issues similar to what the character's going through, call this hotline and they'll help you, right? But I'm not sure how many veterans are reading comic books, right? I mean, I guess Benny from Comic Story and is a veteran himself, so you know, I guess that there is a sizable portion of them that might be reading comics, that might need help, that it makes sense to do this for them. But at the same time, I feel like the story, you know, what's her name? Melissa Flores, I think yeah, Melissa Flores, the lady that wrote that, focused too much on kind of the messaging and not so much on getting a cool plot line and like a very satisfying, like, flow in the pacing of the story. And I think that that's not great, right? Like, I understand and I get it, but also like you're if you want to do that, create an organization to help them or to, you know, do whatever. Don't make a comic book where people are expecting entertainment, not, you know, what's the other word, like relief or support, right? I don't know. I might be completely wrong, right? Like it comes from the perspective that I'm not a veteran. I don't know any veterans. And I don't need help like that, right? So from my perspective, it feels very like unnecessary to do something like that because it negatively impacts the comic book, which is the part that's important, right? Maybe a better way of doing it would have been like make an awesome comic book and then make the proceeds that come out of this comic book go directly to helping veterans. Like that might have been a better way to kind of deal with that, right? If she wanted to make a comic book that was about helping veterans, or like a comic book that helped veterans in some way, that might have been a better way to do it. instead of like, half-assing the story to make sure that your message is clear. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. That I actually kind of feel kind of bad about saying all that. But at the same time, well, it's what I think, right? I'm not going to not say it. So we'll see. If you disagree with me, feel free to do so. Let me know down in the comments and we can have a discussion about it. Here's Green Arrow number 10. Phenomenal issue. I really liked it. I like all of these characters. It felt very like Arrow TV show-esque, and I liked that. I thought it was very fun. And here's Wonder Woman number 7. Gilliam March has a great art style. Is that his name? Yeah. But it doesn't work for these characters. Like, something about the way that this was done doesn't feel that good. And the story was fine. It was kind of cute. It was fun, but having read it, I don't think I would have bought it if I knew what was in it, right? Like, I knew the idea of it, right? I read the solicitation page on Comic Geeks, so I knew what it was about, right? But I wasn't expecting it to be so simple, and I also wasn't expecting the artwork to be like that, right? Like, it wasn't bad. Like, I think Gilliam March is good at drawing, but maybe it was the coloring. Like, something about it didn't work for me. Like, the style was not what I was wanting from the series, or from this specific issue. If it was more of like a little bit more of a manga kind of vibe, I think it would have landed much better. Like, something a little bit cutesier, right? But Gilliam March is a little bit more like serious adult drawing. I don't know what that means, but like, hopefully you guys kind of understand what I'm trying to get at there, because I think that's kind of what the feel of it is. And that doesn't match with the style or the tone of the story. There you go. That's the right word. The tone of the story. It doesn't match that art style, right? And so there's a little bit of a dissonance going on while I was reading it. So, yeah. I have more issues over here. These are the good ones, the ones I want to review for the channel. So here's Dawn Runner. This is the first Rob V book that I ever buy. It's phenomenal. I think he did the Layla Starr, right? The Death of Layla Starr. I think I'm gonna go pick that up because I love this. I thought that was great. I like his writing style a lot. This was very good. It has a little bit of an Evangelion feel to it. It has a little bit of that like Ghost in the Shell feel to it. It's very anime, but the art style is quite unique. It's very different from what I was expecting. It also has a little bit of that like Pacific Rim, like kind of like cyberpunk, like it's all it's all gone to shit, but like we feel good because we're not directly in danger kind of vibe, and there's like these mega corporation kind of things going on, and there's that whole kind of like Jaeger pilots became rock stars overnight kind of vibe to it that I like a lot. I think that there's a lot of good stuff here in terms of inspiration, and the way that the story was handled was quite good. However, and I will mention this in the proper review for this issue later, but I had a little bit of an issue with the way that some things were laid out. In terms of like, I didn't understand how the movement between panels was happening, right? So there's this moment where the main character, I forgot her name, the girl that you see right there in the cover, she's like strung up from something, and then she ends up on this tub of water, and then this woman comes out of nowhere and just kind of hangs out next to her, and then the woman disappears, and then she's suddenly in the kite in the mech, and I don't understand the sequence there, because it felt like she was inside the mech already, and then went into the pool of water to kind of like become one with the mech, kind of like an Evangelion sense, where they go into the water to like become encased in this jelly or whatever. This like, what's it called? Like iambic fluid or whatever. But I didn't understand where the woman came from. And I understand the significance of the character, because it was like her girlfriend or her like longtime friend, the person that she had this ritual with before she went off on her missions. But I didn't understand where they were coming from, like what the space around them was like. And so that was a little bit confusing. And then when she finally launches, when she's out in the mecha and she's about to fight the kaiju, there was a little bit of this satisfaction that I felt. In one sense, because there was this really awesome shot of the mech running that should have been a 2-page spread, and it was only 1 page, and it was unsatisfying because it was like the big moment, and it didn't look as grand as it could have, and that was a bit disappointing. And then once they're fighting, it's hard to track their movements because the mech is very spindly, and so it's kind of, you kind of lose it a little bit. So I had to reread that section a little bit. And so although I like the story, I like the artwork, I think that there is some work to be done to make it clearer when they're fighting, right? And I understand that this is difficult because even, Japanese mecha series have this issue, right? Like sometimes when you're reading a Gundam series, you're like, what the fuck is going on? I don't understand anything. It just looks like a mess of metal, right? Like, or like when you watch Transformers, right? Like at some point in those movies, you're just like, oh, it's just a wall of fucking metal coming on and doing shit all over the place. Like, I understand that it's hard, right? But I feel like maybe a second pass of someone looking at the artwork would have been meaningful, right? Someone else that wasn't the artist or the colorist, right? So that there was more eyes on whether this was, clear or not, right? But it's fine. I mean, overall, it's still a great book. I'm very happy I read it. Here's Conan number 9. This was phenomenal. I loved this issue. I need to reread it, actually. I want to, so I will. And I need to review it, but very good stuff. Here's Red Sonja number 9. This one is fine. There's no problem with it. I mean, it's not my favorite, but I don't hate it. Here's King Kong and Godzilla versus the Justice League. This is 6 out of 7. This is pretty good. I liked it. There's some really awesome scenes here. There's Green Lantern Megazord, which is awesome. Here's Ultimate Spider-Man number 3. This was a really good issue as well. I really enjoyed the fight that's depicted on this cover, actually, which is good. Last time, I don't think that there was a scene that fit, but this is perfectly encapsulating what happened in the issue. That's phenomenal. I love that. I think that's great. Here's Transformers number 6. This is pretty good as well. There's a little bit of confusion on my part. Like, I didn't understand one of the plot points here, but basically at the end of the arc, the Autobots managed to win, and the Decepticons are on the run. And so now we get to rest a little bit and move on to the next arc, right? And I think Jorge Corona is taking over the artwork for that, so that'll be exciting. Here's Thundercats number 2. This introduces a new character who happens to be controlled by Mumra, and this is where the discord between the team is going to start, which is quite good. And then finally, Helen of Windhorn, and this was great. This felt very inspired and very thoughtful, and it felt very real. Like, if you know a little bit about Robert E. Howard, the beginning of this feels very similar to like his life story, right? It's a person in Texas. There's some sort of death involved, and then it gets different, right? Because Robert E. Howard didn't leave anyone behind when he died. Of course, Helen is left behind when her dad dies. And then there's this kind of like, it's not Victorian. I don't know what the right terminology is. I guess it's not Gothic either. I guess it kind of is Gothic. I don't know. There's like this older lady who's there to take on Helen, but Helen is a very like modern girl. And she's like, I don't give a shit. I'm not going to go do what you want me to. Eventually, they manage to come to an agreement. They move away to some like northeast area. She moves into a mansion, and then weird shit starts happening. It's very exciting, and then the ending almost feels like The Witcher, because it's not exactly Conan. It does definitely give me more of a Witcher vibe to it, the way that the story ends, and it was very satisfying. I really enjoyed this issue. I can't wait for more. I think it's great. I love it. The artwork is phenomenal. I have a digital copy of the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. And as soon as I read this, I wanted to rush to read it, to read that, because it's the same team completely. Like, the artist, the writer, the colorist, the letterer, they're all the same. And I wanted more of this. I wanted more of this style, more of this type of storytelling. And I really wanted to rush to read Woman of Tomorrow, but I managed to stop myself. And I was like, okay, I don't need to start something new that I know I'm not supposed to read right now. So I managed to hold myself back, but it was really hard. I really wanted to read more of this. So yeah, hopefully we'll get around to that soon. And then I've been reading Johnny Comet. Actually, I finished this today. This is Frank Frazetta. This is his it's not his earliest work, but it is the first time that he completed a whole series, if I remember correctly. And it was quite interesting. It's not my favorite. I think that there's some issues with this, but given that this is from 1950, I can't really complain too much. Like, it's fucking old. Of course it's gonna have weird problems to it. And most of the problems actually come from the type of scheduling that happened, that was here, because Johnny Comet was a daily comic strip, right? And so every day you had to have something, right? And so Frank Frazetta was basically going crazy every day to draw this, right? And well, that's kind of hard, right? And the guy that was writing for him, because he was only the artist, doesn't seem like he was all that interested in what he was writing, right? So this initially starts as this kind of like daring do, kind of like racing series, right? Which means that there's races involved during the plot lines at some point, usually at the end to kind of solve the issue. But eventually it kind of just starts becoming more like a slice of life thing. And it was enjoyable. But then there's this kind of moment where they kind of switch. They kind of do a rebranding from Johnny Comet to Ace McCoy, which is a very good name, actually. I think it's very good. It's quite enjoyable to hear. And this kind of changes the dynamic of the story. Now it feels a little bit more like it's supposed to be humorous. Of course, the humor of 1950 is quite odd to me now, and 70 years afterwards. And that continues on to the Sunday strips that are back here in color. Right? Well, that's upside down, actually. There you go. And so the last kind of like 50 pages or so are kind of odd. They feel kind of odd to me, but broadly speaking, you're not really interested in this because of the storytelling, right? Like that doesn't really matter too much. What's really good here is the amazing art by Frank Frazetta, and it really shines here in his black and white stuff, right? Like these beautiful women with these really interesting expressions on their faces, these really cool little mechanical car like designs to these little cars, these really wonky ass looking old people that are very interesting and very dynamic, almost cartoony, but in a way that is quite satisfying to look at, right? And like, look at that expression on that lady. Like, you can tell that she's older than, Johnny and Gene, but she's younger than Paul, right? That old guy right there. There is a very good amount of detail in this artwork. Like, if you like Frazetta, I think that you should get this for the artwork. The price is quite good on this right now. This hardcover is usually $50, but I've seen it at $20 for like 3 years, right? So it should be fine. You should be able to get it. But I really enjoyed my time reading this for the artwork. I didn't really care too much about the story. Ultimately, like by the end of it, I was like, okay, thank God it's over. I don't really need to read about these weird like slice of life adventures that are kind of like really dangerous but never feel like full of tension, and then kind of end really abruptly to move on to the next one. It almost kind of has this kind of like Scooby-Doo mystery adventure feel to it that is fun, but it's not like that great, right? Like, I feel like there could have been more to it, but because it's 70 years old, the kind of style and things that people liked back then is quite different from now, right? So that makes sense. And that's it for the comic books. In terms of manga, I read Spy Family #4 and Tengen Hero War. And, well, I'm going to do separate reviews for each of these because this is all of Arc 5 of the series, and this is the first impressions review, so I don't really have too much to say about this that I won't say in those reviews, so that's basically it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you've been reading this month so far, and hopefully I can get this out by tomorrow noon. Fingers crossed, because I don't think so, but we'll see. Anyways, thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.